Good afternoon, folks. We will get started in just a moment. Okay, well, it looks like we have a good group of attendees with us already, and we are at noon. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jillian Saul. I am staff for APA Virginia. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this afternoon, a week earlier than our typical Your Hour scheduling. Your Hour with APA Virginia is generously sponsored by the Berkeley Group. Thank you to our friends there for supporting the series. This month, we have a presentation on engaging the next generation, youth participation in planning and environmental projects, presented by our friends over at EPR. We have Tyler Hinkle, Amanda Ponce, and Will Cockrell with us this afternoon. And they will further introduce themselves in just a moment, but I just wanted to run through a few housekeeping items and provide some CM information. So this webinar is certified for equity credits, or one equity credit, excuse me, and I will drop the link to the listing on the APA site in the chat box momentarily. This is our website page, which has recently been updated. So you can head over there to find some information on our chapter and on the webinar series in general. I'll also put the link in the chat. Just a few logistical items. We really do encourage questions. Please put any of your questions in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. That will just help us keep track of all inquiries. However, this is really meant to be an engaging webinar, so there will be plenty of opportunities to put any open-ended responses in the chat. Our speakers, whoops, sorry about that. Our speakers will also have some Mentimeter polling for you. So you'll have that information provided in a moment. If you have if there's ever a time where you'd prefer to ask your question out loud during the formal Q&A at the end, feel free to use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted, but otherwise feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded and it will be shared to our YouTube page in the next few days, where you can find all of the previously recorded webinars in the series. I'll also put that link in the chat as well. So I will go ahead and hand it over to our friends at EPR, but thank you everyone for being with us, and feel free to direct message me if you have any logistical questions.
Great. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here. Jillian, as a youth engagement session, when you talk about YouTube, you have to say, like and subscribe, hit that bell, make sure to do all the YouTuber things that folks do. But this is a presentation we actually gave at the APA Virginia conference in July, and Amanda was really heading up a federal effort here through EPA on youth engagement, which is really the impetus for it. But as she was talking through that work, others here in the office had mentioned some youth engagement efforts that we had done as we're trying to come up with some best practices on how to engage with younger folks here in our communities. So we ended up kind of putting together this presentation for the conference. It did quite well, I believe, at the conference, and now we're following up with doing it virtually here on this webinar series. So on the next slide, we'll formally introduce ourselves, but Amanda, if you want to kick it off.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Amanda Ponce. I'm a principal planner here with EPR in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I guess my connection to youth is I have two of them, two high school students, and I also teach at UVA, the short course in bicycle and pedestrian planning. So thanks,
Yeah,
Will.
great. And Will Cockrell, principal planner, also with EPR, also with the youth. My daughter's 9 years old, and I feel like I get kind of on the cutting edge of young people talk. She came home one day and was doing 6, 7, and you find little trends like that. I'll get with my college students. With I teach at UVA as well, teach government in the School of Architecture, and then also teach the capstone class and the grad students. Just a quick note here: Amanda and I went to school together. All three of us actually teach at UVA, so we've got that in terms of working with college age and younger folks in that capacity. And then Tyler was actually one of my students many years ago, and was very eager to get him on board as soon as possible. And I'll kick it over to you, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Yeah, I'm Tyler Hinkle. I'm a senior planner also with EPR, and I also teach at UVA. So I teach a rural planning class taught this past spring, and then I'm teaching quantitative methods next year. So always enjoy working with kids and being able to teach the next generation. I pass it back to you, Will.
Well, we'll kick it out to you all on the webinar here. So for our first question is, what does youth engagement mean to you? It's kind of a broad, open question, but sometimes broad, open questions give us a lot of that kind of deep data that we look for in engagement. And we had good responses on this when we were in person, but if you want to use the QR code, we have a Mentimeter set up.
I think Jillian might also be putting that in the chat.
Yeah, I also got that on the chat there. So that's the first question here of what does youth engagement mean to you? So we got it in the chat, got the QR code. If you want to grab that QR code with your smartphone or click on the link. As you're doing that, we'll jump over to the next slide and just show how people responded when we were in person back in July down in Portsmouth. And we had 46 people responded to this, and here's just a few kind of word cloud of some of the most used words in those responses. But on that one, yeah, for sure. Fun really has to be part of any good youth engagement effort here. Usually innovative, I would say too, inclusive of young folks many times aren't at the table, and they really ought to be. It's a big cohort in our communities when you think of kind of youth being, under 25 even. But if we're still, how's the Mentimeter looking, Tyler?
Yeah, you should be able to see the results now.
Yeah, looking actually pretty similar to the one back in July. So yeah, fresh ideas, yes, for sure. I mean, fresh ideas on engagement, but also we'll talk about one of the real benefits of working with younger folks and engaging with younger folks in our community is we also get a lot of fresh ideas from them that we wouldn't necessarily get when we go out there and work with the communities. That's also important. And creativity for sure. It's definitely a different type of engagement with younger folks, as we said before. So just kind of some different ideas. We'll give you, or we'll offer up in this webinar just a few different ideas for you to think about. But we also hope to learn a little bit from you all as well, as we have more of these Mentimeter links here, and of course the comment in the chat as well. Okay, on the youth engagement front of why it matters. In the state of Virginia, the population of folks under 25, if we want to kind of draw the line roughly there, it's about 24% in Virginia who are kind of in that cohort there. Now, there's a lot of changes in that cohort. If you look at kind of the earlier, so if you're under 10, that's about 11% statewide. Kind of teenagers, so 10 to 19 kind of range. It's about 13% of the state of Virginia population. Um, and again, I mean, if you add it up, that's 25. Of course, under 10 is kind of a hard type of engagement and usually doesn't happen as much. But if you take that under 10 out, and some kids under that age, you can engage with in processes. But even if you took it from uh, ages 10 up to 25, that's still a significant proportion, about almost 15% of the state of Virginia, a little under that. So this is a big part of our communities that is not involved in most of our, or really any of our engagement processes. One thing we do here, I know, Tyler, you were mentioning doing a lot of work in rural communities. You teach a class in that as well. And I've certainly from a rural county and have done lots of work in rural communities across Virginia. Of what we hear time and time again is as our communities are getting older, local officials will say, our kids, we raise them, we educate them, and then they go off to school and they don't come back. And how do we get our kids to come back to our community? How do we keep our kids in our community? And that's a hard one for sure. But my honest response back to that question is, well, did you ever talk to them? Did you ever ask them of what are they looking for in terms of where to live? Normally, that's job opportunity, and that's a big part of the equation if you're looking to keep younger folks in our communities. But I do think another piece of this is just we don't really even ask the younger folks in our communities what they want in their community, kind of what their concerns are, of what are the assets from their perspective, and what are some of their ideas as well. So it's a big part of our counties and cities and towns that we're not talking to. It's a part that really can represent the future of our communities. And if we're looking to really retain a lot of those younger folks, which brings so many benefits, it's really important to start to build and cultivate that interest in their own community. And I would also put onto that list of really helping to make great citizens is really showing how you can get involved. And there's an example here recently in Virginia. As you all know, here in Virginia, we had some pretty big elections back earlier this month. And there were some changes up on the state side on the election front, but also on the local side as well. I don't know if you've been following, but in Surrey County, Virginia, there was an election there, and it was Cameron True, who is 19 years old. He's a college student. He's 19, and he ran for office for the Board of Supervisors there. And he actually ran against his high school civics teacher, and he won by 10 votes. He won there. And I haven't met him, but I've certainly been impressed with his interviews where they asked, why he ran and what he's hoping to accomplish. And he definitely hit on those points of ensuring that younger people have a voice, that younger people can get involved, they can make a difference. He's also concerned about affordable housing as well. So I think some great examples of how a lot of going out there of younger folks, I think, really do want to get involved. They just don't necessarily know how to, and that's part of what we should aim to do, is give them that avenue. So on the next slide here. So again, on this one of we're talking of the younger cohorts here of up to 25%, depending on where we are, what communities we're in. So almost a quarter of our communities not really being at the table, not really being engaged with, for the most part, when you look out there, it's pretty, what's uncommon to see planning processes that aren't specifically targeting younger folks. And I think it's a big mistake that we're committing here, where getting their perspective can help us identify those needs. I think the needs of younger folks actually overlaps quite a bit with the needs of seniors and other kind of underrepresented folks in our communities, because transportation is a big challenge there with them. kind of centers, places that they can go, just as with seniors is a challenge. Again, empowerment, I think is a big one there, of just kind of frustration with a lot of younger folks that they don't really have a say, but also lost opportunity of, again, this is a great chance to cultivate these leaders of tomorrow and get their thoughts about their own community. And if we do it right, I think we can really set up our communities. That investment in the younger folks will pay off over the years as we have more active citizens who know how to get involved and who know these processes better. On the next slide. So just, again, kind of hitting on some of these themes. We are going to get into a few case studies on these. I'll talk a little bit about a project I worked on out in Colorado, Southwest Colorado. Tyler's going to give some case studies of his work, especially in Shenandoah County. And then Amanda's going to give some of her case studies as well from the work that she was doing. And I know that she this past summer was doing a lot of work and some research and best approaches on engaging with younger folks. So look on the next one. One of the things that you'll see with some of these case studies here is kind of putting young folks in a position where they can be successful, which with engagement, I think is really important. Of many times having younger folks together, younger folks who know each other. It could be a little intimidating working, being in a meeting with adults for the younger folks, because it's not common where we're trying to give them the mic and really want to hear from them. So if they're in a room with other adults, that can be a little bit hard for them. So sometimes some focus groups, I'll give a couple of examples of 2 comp plans we're working on where actually we have a stakeholder group that's specifically made up of young people. With the workshop design, we'll hit on that also with some of these case studies. There's some other examples out there too. I know with City of Hampton, I don't know if we've got anybody from Hampton on here, but they do have a youth commission, and I'm putting a link to that website right in the chat. It's right there. That might be going to youth, to hosts and panelists, if Jillian could share that with everybody as well. But there's also some built-in systems where it's not just engaging younger folks for a specific process, but creating a system where those younger folks are just constantly involved here, like a youth council or a youth commission, as an example there. So on the next slide, we're gonna kick it off to Amanda.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. Thanks for setting us up for some of these different case studies. And as Will mentioned, our inspiration for this was some work that we were doing over the last year with the EPA. They had a specific focus through their Building Blocks for Sustainable Communities program to really develop some sort of a model to work with youth through their building blocks process. And so a lot of this work came out of that. And so we're going to focus a little bit more on the collaborative piece of the puzzle that Will had shown in the slide before, but we did still want to give some examples of those empowered and consultative kinds of examples too. So this first slide is from Multnomah Youth Commission out in Portland. And so the city of Portland and Multnomah County have worked together for over 25 years to expand youth leadership opportunities through the advisory board, the Multnomah Youth Commission. Over that 25-year time period, they've worked with almost 500 youth between the ages of 13 and 21 to help influence policy and positive perceptions of youth. And so some of the things that they're working on, just to give some examples, they have 3 different subcommittees currently working. One is about education access and really trying to think about chronic absenteeism and pursuing policy changes to change the start time for high school students to later in the day so that students are more able to get there on time. They're also focusing on elections education and generally engagement for youth. They have another subcommittee that focuses on transit justice, and this one advocates for their Youth Pass for All, which is free access to public transit for youth under the age of 18. And they also do mini grants for youth-led climate justice work with funding provided by the Oregon Community Foundation's Community 101 program. So kind of a neat example there. And then lastly, with youth violence, so working with the Juvenile Justice Department on alternatives to youth detention, and Portland Police Bureau's Equity Office to explore and foster positive youth police relationships. So just wanted to provide one example, even though it's not something that we work on directly, of ways that youth are empowered in those youth commissions in another location. So turning our attention to our building blocks process, the first the first taste we got of this was last year. We were working with a group of folks up in Maine, the Penknife Passamaquoddy tribe of Pleasant Point, and they were trying to come up with a vision for. They had set aside about 500 acres of land that was intended to. Um, that was intended for youth. And yet in our process with them, we realized, hey, this this really needs, if this is intended for youth, they really need to be involved in the process. So we have kind of a standard process for working with the communities when we're working on these building blocks processes, and modified that to be able to go to youth at the local school to help kind of get their ideas for the site. And so we usually are in person for about 2 days, where we're learning about the community and having a community workshop. And in this case, we actually changed our model so that we went to the school. We worked with approximately 60 students from grades 5 to 8 at their local elementary school, and really tried to get them to tell us about some of the different outdoor activities and aspirations that they have for the Penknife property, many of whom didn't even know that property had existed and was kind of being dedicated to them. So it was really great. We were able to hear a lot about the things that excited them, and what were some of the barriers that kept them from being outdoors, and really helped to kind of set the stage for the local community working forward to develop a groundwork for a sustainable and culturally rooted vision for the future of the property, really working in those ideas from the students that the property was intended for. Next slide. So over this past summer, we were working on topics related to heat islands. And so this was specifically kind of coming out of that one project with the specific site aspirations at Penknife, wanting to work that into more of a model with their program. And so we were working to address heat island impacts in 5 communities. And so we're going to share some of the results from 3 of those communities today, and some of the different ways that we engaged with youth. And so this first example is from the Peoplestown neighborhood, which is a neighborhood outside of Atlanta, Georgia, historically African American neighborhood that has been very, very active in their community since the 1960s, dealing with environmental justice and things like that. And a local community-based organization, Eco Action, was the lead applicant, and they had a summer youth program that was working in Peoplestown to plant trees and things like that. And they wanted us to engage with their cohort of the summer youth program. So what we did in this community was used a place it model, which I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that model. It's kind of a nationally recognized model for engagement could be used with adults or youth. I had learned about it at the Main Street conference and was really eager to kind of put it into action and test it out. And what you do is kind of gather different types of found objects. And the idea behind it is to tap into um, and kind of getting them thinking outside the box about different solutions to their communities. So in this case, we asked them to ask them about their memories of heat in the neighborhood, and then ask them to design um, their ideal cool neighborhood. And so we got lots of different ideas. I think one of the lessons learned here was really to be specific with our language. The first time we did it with the first group of youth, we said cool neighborhood, and they didn't, even though were talking about heat islands and different ways to cool down the neighborhood, they didn't actually get the connection of when we said cool, we meant how do we cool down the neighborhood, and not just cool as in like what's cool for a teenager. So that was something that we learned in the two rounds that we did that. But students had a lot of really interesting ideas. Of course, lots of ideas about these are students who are involved in planting trees, so they wanted to see more trees in their neighborhood, having green roofs, using multimodal transportation, and they weren't using those words necessarily, but talking about getting people out of their cars to be able to walk and bike so that you weren't getting the exhaust from the cars in the neighborhood. And one student also talked about having more basketball courts and using cool pavement for their basketball courts. So kind of a neat example. And I saw somebody put in the chat about Peoplestown. Peoplestown is a neighborhood within the larger metro Atlanta area. It's just southeast of the downtown, like the downtown proper. So just so that folks kind of get a sense of where that is. Next slide. So in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we had a slightly different setup where we were working primarily with students from Indiana Tech, who were then working with an after-school program. So we kind of had two different youth ages involved. We had the students from Indiana Tech, the National Society of Black Engineers, who were working with the after-school program in this particular neighborhood in Fort Wayne. And these are just some examples of the activity that we did with them, which was, the Indiana, we were really helping to facilitate the engagement through Indiana Tech, and they were the ones that were doing a lot of the direct engagement with the students. And so they took disposable cameras, gave the students disposable cameras, which was really, interesting for them because they were younger for the most part. And so it was a new technology that they'd never seen before, and took pictures and then also measured temperatures of different places throughout the community. And so you can see here some of the posters that they put together. Showing how different types of features of the built environment impacted the temperature of the community. So just a little example there. You can see that, the places with a lot of pavement were a lot hotter than the places that had trees and water features and things like that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to talk about his experience working in the Banner neighborhoods.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I had the chance to work with folks on East Baltimore. There's an organization there that works with kids to engage kids in the neighborhood called Banner Neighborhoods. We were also looking at urban heat conditions within the neighborhood. So the activity we worked with the kids was they walked around the neighborhood, took pictures of places that they felt that were hot and places that they felt maybe were not. And they took those photos and then used that together to craft social media posts and hashtags to say, ways to promote the idea that, there are places in the city that are hot and places that are not, and ways to improve that. And then the city department, they're shared on social media the kids' ideas to help promote, active participation and reducing urban heat island issues in the city. So it was a kind of a collaborative effort with both the local organization and also the kids who got to share those ideas, and then also we shared those ideas with the adults who were part of the working group the next time we met. Some other case studies. When I was the county planner for Shenandoah County for 6 years, that's the county I grew up in. So I went to kindergarten through high school, all through there. So I was intended to wanted to go back after I finished college. And one thing I wanted to make sure we did when we did our comp plan was engage the kids, because I was one of those kids one day in the past. So one thing that we did, I know probably most planners love is Legos. So we thought, what's a fun way we could get kids engaged in designing what's happening in their community, both addressing land use, but also mixed use opportunities. So when we went out throughout the community at various different festivals and events, while the parents were talking to us, the kids were able to do this interactive Lego game and build out what they would think the main intersection in the town or the village might look like after future investment. So it allowed them to have a tangible engagement with what's possible in the community. Another thing we did was a high school survey. So we sent it out to all the high schoolers. The principals of the high schools helped us get this out through the email chains. And I asked general questions about what some students' concerns are in the community, but also asked some open-ended things. So if they said that they were not planning on staying in the community after they graduated, what are some reasons why they may not want to stay? What are some reasons that would convince them to want to stay in the community? And we were able to use those inputs to craft actions in the plan to help hopefully make a future where the kids would want to return. And then another example, what we did was we did a summer engagement every summer with a group of governor school students who would come, and we would give them some type of exercise of, here's a situation in the community. Then they together had to work as a team to try and solve it. So the first year we did it, we kind of gave each group the community of Daisy, which is kind of a mountainous ski resort community. And each one had a little bit of a planning scenario they had to handle. And the test was just to see, would the kids work together? How are they functioning well as a team and coming up with ideas? And then at the end, they all worked together as a team, sharing their learned experience in the small groups with the larger group. And then the second year, we partnered with the town of Woodstock to help the kids help the town design what could be done with this vacant space where a building had burned down in the middle of downtown. Crafting ideas of, some had ideas of a skate park or, ice cream stand. And so that helped the town in understanding what are some ideas and needs that kids would want to see so the kids are more active in the downtown. I can turn this back over to Will.
Yeah, and this here was part of an EPA project here. It was recreation economy for rural communities, working with a lot of communities across the country on how to leverage their outdoor recreation assets and help them build their local economies off of those assets. And specifically for Monte Vista, Colorado, the southwest Colorado, high desert plain area, very arid here. It's a smaller town. I think it's kind of under 2,000 people here. And with this specific project, we're looking at how to kind of reinvest in the downtown of Monte Vista here, or Monte, as the locals call it. We had a workshop, great attendance at the community workshop. We had about 80 people there for a 2-day workshop, and that was day 1, day 2. I'll tell you about one thing we did that didn't work out, and then one thing we did that worked out actually quite well. The first thing of what didn't necessarily work out is to get people to the meeting. We know that childcare is always an issue. And in this community in particular, we talking to locals there are a lot of folks in the community that they take their family to everything. They always do everything as a family. So we did actually get some folks from a local daycare on site, and we were ready. We asked attendees to bring their kids if they wished, and that we had some folks there who can help watch their kids as they engaged in the open house event or the workshop. We also had some activities lined up for those younger folks as they were in that space that we're going to go through, kind of looking at what are some of the concerns that they see, what are some of the barriers for them, where are places that they would like to go or access, or where do they hang out. Unfortunately, we didn't really get many people bringing their kids there. I think we only had like one or two kids there, so we didn't have an opportunity to really do the engagement side. Um, so just kind of think about that a bit when you're doing your meeting designs. Is there an opportunity to have childcare on site to help one get folks to the community, to the meeting itself, but two is while you have those kids there, of the folks, the daycare or whoever it is you're working with, of if you had some activities you could do with the kids to get their perspective. The thing that did work really well here in this workshop is we put out a survey. We worked with the local high school here in Monte Vista and got a survey out to the kind of those high school students. We actually got about 100 responses, which was quite good. It was a smaller high school. Going into it, a lot of folks said that, these high school students are not going to take it all that seriously. They're going to be, you know, they're going to make jokes and so forth in the survey. Out of 100, we really only had one respondent who was being a little silly with their responses here. But I'd say the other 99 were actually quite genuine. Actually, there was a lot in there that was really kind of touching to hear from kids here in Monte Vista. We asked, um, where they go when they go outside, and kind of what activities they do outside. Where do they meet with friends? And some of the responses we saw were that they wanted to go to a park, they wanted to go somewhere, but they had no one to go with. That they were lonely. Actually, a lot of the kids in these survey responses specifically used that word, that they were lonely and they had no one to meet with or nowhere to go in this small town in Southwest Colorado. So when we were doing the workshop with the 80 participants here with the adults, one of the first things we did is we did a full report on the youth survey, and we said, this is what your kids are saying. And this is their experience according to them, coming straight from them. So we wanted to share that with you all as a group, talking to the participants. And let's start here and really pausing there and seeing, really, I mean, to be completely honest, some of the pain in some cases here coming from some of the kids of what they were describing, but also some of the things that they loved about the community as well. And that was a great place to start off with, of if the kids weren't going to be there in the room, at least trying to engage with the youth in some way, and then present those responses back out to the larger group, and then to start from there and see how we can move forward with that kind of in our minds. All right. So on this one, we are gonna kind of again ask you to participate here. We have the Mentimeter QR code on here. We're just asking for other examples of what are some other examples out there of some youth engagement that you've used. And we also have the chat here, so you can share that on the chat as well. Again, this is where when we were there in person, this was great to hear of a few different ideas of what people have done. But what are some youth engagement examples that you all have that you've used? We're kind of pausing here if you want to use the QR code to go on there and enter some of those examples. As you do that, I'll kind of talk in the background
Um,
of
Will, I'm just
yeah.
gonna, while people are adding those in, I was just going to say that there have been a couple of questions here about how were you able, and this is probably for Will and Tyler, how were you able to get school to support the survey exercise, and how do you get permission for that? And so it might be useful to talk about your experience as well as Tyler's while people are bringing in their experience.
I'll throw this out there again, and I keep using this. I think it's Chris Lawrence, who's in Stanton. We're doing a comp plan there, and he had such a great. I keep using this. I told him I'm using his quote, so hopefully he said he's okay with that. But it was make relationships before you need them, and I think that is something that as planners we do not give enough thought to that. We need to have a public engagement process for our plan. We put together surveys, we put together meetings, we ask people to attend. Maybe people show up, maybe they don't show up. We do the best we can to use that information. There's a better way. I think the better way is that public engagement never ends. It's always happening, and part of how it's always happening is you're always cultivating those relationships with your community so that when you do have that engagement process, you are trying to kind of get something from the community in that update that you're doing, that it's not just a cold ask, that you've already established that. We were very lucky in Monte Vista. Staff there was absolutely amazing. The city manager, Gigi, was just outstanding. I still have like Monte Vista stuff on my shelf here that I look at every day. Um, and they already had a relationship with the school, and it was a really strong relationship between Monte Vista and the school system. So that made it really easy on that. And the local staff, they reached out to the school. They were more than happy to assist. I'll throw a couple of ones out here too. City Stanton, working with them on our comp plan update. Rodney and Maggie over there are, and amazing. They're great planners and great people over there. They actually, we included the schools as on our stakeholder group, so that the school system is on a stakeholder group, part of the comp plan of helping to build those relationships with them. And through the stakeholder involvement from the school system, they actually invited us into the schools. And Maggie and Rodney presented to their civics class, and they developed an activity that the students, the high school students, will actually employ throughout the school on ways to get feedback from their classmates. So that's the other thing of if you're trying to get engagement in there, it's one thing if you're a planner, you work for the city or the county or the town, and you go into a community or you're a consultant to ask people questions. They might not know you, so you're only going to get so much information. But if you kind of help train other folks in that cohort, in this case, students, then you can get a lot more honest information, get a much higher response rate on that too. So really, that's happening now where we're getting those high school students are actually working on that. And then same thing with doing a comp plan for Waynesboro, where we included the schools, we included youth, nonprofit groups, and so forth in a stakeholder team on the comp plan. And then through those relationships, make the relationships before you need them. They gave us a list of students, and we have 11 stakeholder groups working on the comp plan. The 12th is our young people, so from the school system, and they're about to meet here too. So it was really trying to build those relationships with the school system, and local government notoriously don't have great relationships, across the country. But it's so important to just, you got to put the infrastructure in before you even start to think about your engagement process.
Yeah, I'll add real quick. I had a relationship with the principal at the high school because I corresponded to that school, so him and I were very close. But that's one of three. So going off what Will said, we built a relationship with the superintendent of the schools because we were talking about capital planning with them, and as we helped them out with working on things with the comp plan, she was able to help us out and directed the principals of the high schools to send that out. So it's hard to say no to the superintendent when they've given the directive that the survey has to go out, and that was extremely helpful.
And I'll just say there are lots of really neat examples here that people are posting in the chat. I can't actually read the slide very well. Tyler, can you share what people have um, been saying on the
Yeah,
Mentimeter?
we have a couple ideas like visual preference survey, ring toss, color forms to build a city, attending the career
Cool.
day, art class, bike walk days, um, coloring your community, master plan carnival. So all kinds
Ah,
of different ideas that folks are
cool.
using to engage youth. I can turn it back to the slides.
Nearly every community open house event I've ever done, there's a kid somewhere in there, and they're just kind of with their parents, and they'll come by my station. I'll talk to the parents, and then I'll ask the kid like, "Hey, um, you know, can I get your thoughts?" And they'll kind of be shy, and they'll say, I'm just a kid." But if you can get them to actually start talking to you, oh my gosh, it's usually really amazing stuff that they have to share. So it's on top of all the benefits of youth engagement that there are, there's also a personal one of just really working with young folks and getting their perspective of people who've just have never been asked. There's something really kind of kind of joyous, actually, really kind of on a personal level. To see them kind of light up and say, you're actually asking me for my opinion. This is cool. And normally what they have to say is usually really meaningful. So
Yeah, just to kind of take us out towards, I think, the last slides. Some strategies for success when you're engaging youth is you need to be able to meet youth where they are. We need
yeah,
to think about where we can fit into their daily lives rather than them trying to fit into our planning process. We can do that through some creative tools. Kids are very much so online, so there are ways you can use online tools, videos to engage kids, the youth. We need to in some situations, you may need to pay youth for their time and input. It's something we had looked at when we were in Baltimore. Certain students who were, working for the city and how that time was going to be covered when they're participating with things ended up not because it was actually a code red day, so it was too hot for them to be out, which is clear for our urban heat island issue. And then we need to be able to close the loop. We need to show that we're not just collecting input just to hear input. We
yeah.
need to actually show how that input is going to be meaningfully used as part of the planning process. So some tools and tactics that you could look into. We covered some of these, but not all of them. Of course, story maps to help show some ways like for safe routes to school. Some communities have used Minecraft or SimCity to kind of make like a digital model of the community and have kids interact with things. There might be designs or art where there could be some storytelling, some artistic ways for them to think about the neighborhood. And then, videos, you might have some short videos that are on like TikTok or Instagram for kids to be involved and meet them where they are on social media.
The Minecraft one is pretty cool. That case study, you could take your community and actually import it in to Minecraft, and it's kind of a neat idea. Um,
So we have another quick Mentimeter poll just asking what are some tools you've used to engage the youth?
Give another tip of don't say hashtag in front of kids because it's not a thing anymore. I said that. They started laughing, told me how old I was, which is true.
Somebody put in the chat a survey was one way that helped get people involved with the skate park. that wound up opening a few years later.
Yeah. We had there was one conference session we had where, gosh, I forgot his name. Amanda or Tyler, if you remember his name, but he did like transportation planning TikToks on there. Um, I've been in, which I think was effective on that. It was more just educational. There's a couple comp plans I was working on where people said like we should do TikToks to engage the youth, and you can certainly do that. I think there's some value, but I would just really think through it first, though. Of It's always good to think, what are our objectives here? What's our message? Just trying to do something cool for the sake of it being cool is usually not going to be super successful. So you got to really think through what your objectives are and what you hope to get as an outcome. Use it, provide snacks for sure. I like the visual preference survey. I think a lot of younger folks um, kind of can relate more to images. Youth councils, a lot of cool ones out there.
We can share some of our results too when we asked the same question back in July, as folks answer. Prizes and games, bike to school day,
Yeah.
youth planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
Check this.
I think physical activity, I think that's good. If you like get people moving in that space of, um, I mean, yeah, also try to think through how long you can keep people's attention, right? And kind of work back from that of how much time do you have. Um, I was going to say it's hard for kids to sit still for that long, but hey, man, it's hard for adults to sit still for that long too. So, um, just like if you can kind of build in there into your design, if you have a meeting, a need to get up and to move somewhere can be helpful, especially with, if you're looking at like teenage years, kind of to break up and get into smaller groups can be really helpful. Kind of talking at a larger group can be really intimidating if you're a kid, or if you're, any kid, but so kind of smaller groups can help them feel a little bit more comfortable
Yeah.
speaking.
And I'll just say too, from our experience working with the heat islands, when you're coming into a community for a very short technical assistance, which is very different than a comp plan or
Yeah.
some other longer term planning effort, I think that our client at the EPA really thought that when we were going to be doing this, the youth engagement, that we would have a really strong kind of youth educator type person. And I feel like where our efforts were the most successful was where we did have that strong youth
Yeah.
educator connection to the students, because it is about trust and it is about relationships, and students are going to be more it's a lot harder to come into those situations where you don't have the relationships with the kids. Whereas if you're partnering with a teacher or a club organizer or something like that who already has those relationships, that tends to be a little bit more successful, or in the experience, coming from the experience of the quick hit technical assistance, that seemed to work out a bit better for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I think if you can get kind of a familiar face in the room, like a teacher or someone they're familiar with can help a lot. Or like, it's always good when you recruit people into engagement, folks who are underrepresented, if you kind of don't recruit just one individual, but kind of groups of people so that, they're there with people who are like them and they can feel more comfortable. I think also with younger folks too, I think we still get this growing up of kind of stranger danger of don't talk to strangers. And when you go into like a public meeting, like you inherently have to do that to some degree. So of, again, trying to, have a familiar face in the room if you can. All right,
And
Tyler.
the last Mentimeter question, just, what are some things that you have going on in your community right now that you feel like youth engagement could be useful for? In July, we did a scenario exercise where we kind of broke into little groups with everyone. And these are some examples of what folks had shared of, what they would do in the scenarios that they had given to involve kids and youth in the planning process. So, we have education, a mashed paper game with housing and jobs, make sure they know about the profession, provide future growth scenarios and travel models, help educate kids, and mental mapping with the community. So we'll just give that a few minutes and then have just a few more slides. And we have a complete streets plan, park and trail master plans, redesigning a park, multimodal transportation plan, capital improvement planning, school closures, boundary changes, regional strategic plan. So all kinds of ways that folks are thinking of using youth engagement in the process.
On the comp plan one too, kind of just think about in your comp plan of how you can really highlight kind of that perspective. Could you even have a chapter on the youth in your community? I mean, it's not something you usually see, but
So just wrapping things up, and we can take a peek at the responses once they all come in. As you think ahead, think about some projects you could use youth engagement. There's some ways you could partner with schools or existing youth organizations, and then being able to share that power and decision making with the youth in the community. There's a couple resources we'll share, which I'm sure you also have access to the slides. So these are clickable links. And Amanda or Will, if you wanted to hop in and talk about any of these resources, feel free to.
Yeah, we just wanted to share a couple of different examples, that might be useful. I don't have anything specific. I did mention the place it that we used, and this link gives a good example of that. I know we only have 4 minutes left, and maybe we can. I think there are a couple other questions that we haven't necessarily addressed. Somebody asked, once you've met with these youth and youth groups, do you let them know how you've used their ideas, and do you offer recognition in the form of, public recognition, authorship in the comp plan, or anything like that? And I have a response, but I didn't know if Tyler or Will wanted to jump in there.
no, go for it.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just say we always cited at least students who are involved, those who were maybe high school, if they were more so just survey takers, not so much, but if they were actively helping write things, we definitely cited them.
Yeah, and in our example with Peoplestown, for example, we went to the community a day in June and then came back in July to meet with the neighborhood. And as part of that neighborhood presentation, we brought students who participated in the first youth site visit and had them share their perspectives and results to the neighborhood. So that was one way that we got them engaged and involved with the planning process, so that they knew that the information was kind of being shared. It wasn't just something that we did once and that was it. They knew that their information was being shared with the neighborhood. Also asked, kind of, do you break up the youth in attendance into age groups, or smaller, younger versus teens and 20-year-olds? And again, I'll just say from our experience working in Peoplestown, where we wound up having 50 students, which was a lot bigger than we thought we were going to have. I think, again, the vision was we'd be working with maybe 8 to 15 students. So we did have 2 separate activities. So while one group was doing the Place It activity, another group of 25 was outside doing a walking tour. And within each group that was inside, we had smaller groups of, 5 or 6 kind of working together in small groups. I will also say in that with that same group, reminding the kids that we're all here and are listening to one another, and reminding them to have to put their phones in the table. We kind of had to do a phone stack in the middle of the table because, they definitely were a little more engaged in their phones than they were initially with some of the things that we were doing. So, it is the reality of kind of what we're working with sometimes. And so, again, had we had a teacher or somebody with more direct relationship with those students, we might have been able to head that off a little bit better. But any other questions?
I was going to say, Amanda, when we were in Sutton doing that workshop that we were doing together, one of the participants brought her granddaughter, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
I was thinking about that one too as you were
Yeah.
presenting.
And she just wanted to sit in the hallway. She's like, "Oh, I'm just here with my grandma." And I was like, "No, you don't. Like, come on. This affects you too." So she sat in there, and we're asking for comments, and sh I would kind of go over and just check on her, like, "Hey, how do you think it's going?" Da da da. And she said, "Yeah, I don't feel comfortable speaking up." And I said, "Oh, I totally understand. I gotcha." So, but if you have any comments, if you want to write it down on a note card, you know, and just like kind of signal to me, and I'll go over and I'll grab it. Just whatever makes you feel comfortable. So she did that, and man, oh man, everything she wrote on those note cards was gold. It was
Mm.
like the best comments in there, and she would give them to me, and I'd ask like, "Do I have permission to read this out loud? I'd love to." And she said, "Yeah, go for it." And the room, I think, kind of gave her a little bit of an ovation for all the great feedback she had. So um, I encourage you to try to engage these folks who were so commonly kind of just not really thought about and not really included in the process. And it's going to bring a lot of value to your process. It's going to help you as you look forward to the future. Let's think about the future with younger folks. And I think in the process too, it's a feel good thing. Um, Kind of hearing their perspective and seeing the joy that they get by participating. It's one of those things that kind of fills your heart up in a job that can get a little frustrating sometimes. So I hope you have an opportunity to engage the youth in your community.
Well, thank you, Will, for sharing that story, which I think is a good place to end. And we are after 1 o'clock, but I think this was a great webinar. Lots of great resources and insights shared from our presenters and many from our attendees as well. So thank you everybody for engaging with us this afternoon. Again, please keep your eyes on your inboxes. The follow-up correspondence to attendees will go out, which will include the slides, contact information for our speakers, and the recording link on our YouTube page. But otherwise, I'll hand it over to our speakers if they have any final remarks. But thank you everyone for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.